Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to start the Tamiya M-06 Lotus Europa Special Car Kit. This is going to be the first time I build a M-06 chassis. We're going to be building it in the M-06M configuration, which has a 225mm wheelbase. In this video we're going to do steps 1 through 4, which is to build the differential and put together the gearbox. Just a quick note, wherever we see this tube symbol, we're going to be applying grease to this area. The parts listed on the left margin tells you what hardware you're going to need for that step. For example, for step 1, we need to find 3 BA7 screws, 2 BA10 washers, 2 of these BA17 large bevel gears, 3 BA18 small bevel gear, and this BA19 star shaft. The BA prefix just means it's in the A parts bag. The diagrams on the left are printed to scale. You can use it to find the correct screws. Alright, let's start by gathering all of the parts and hardware we're going to need. This right here is the A parts bag. These are the differential gears. This is a tube of Tamiya grease. You can use this throughout the build. I'm going to be using the silicone grease that I put in this plastic syringe. Silicone grease is great on plastic, and using a syringe is a lot less messy. The 2 washers we need are inside this bag. This is the differential case. I found it in the little bag with all the other gears. I'm going to put this washer at the bottom and try to line it up. Then I'm going to put some silicone grease on it. We're going to drop one of these large bevel gears in next. We need to make sure the gear lines up. Push it all the way down into the case. And make sure it comes out on the other side. Apply some grease to the face of the gear. Now we're going to put the 3 small bevel gears onto the star shaft. We're supposed to put some grease on the end of these shafts, but I'm going to squeeze it into the grooves instead. Now I'm going to put this back together, line it up with those grooves, and drop it in. It should look like that. Again, we need to put some grease onto the gears. Now we're going to drop this last gear in face down and make sure it seats properly. Then we're going to put some grease onto the back. And then put on the second washer and put some grease on that as well. We've put in all the gears, it's time to close it up. We're going to take the lid. You see these 3 stems? We need to make sure they line up with the grooves in the diff case. Push down gently. Make sure the lid seats properly. Now we're going to put in the 3 screws. The screws we need are these thin silver ones. Let's see if this screwdriver is small enough. It looks like it's going to work. Make sure the 3 screws are evenly tight and our differential is complete. We're done with step 1. For step 2, we're going to build the gearbox. We're going to need parts D5, 6, and 7. If you didn't buy ball bearings, you're going to be using 2 of these plastic ones. I'm going to use this Racing set that has all the bearings I need for the M-06 chassis. Alright, there's 1 and 2. The screws we need are in this tray. This long BA1 screw, the BA3 and BA5 screws. We're going to need these two F6 bearing holders, and they're going to be on this tree here and here. We need D5, which is this one, D7, and D6 right here. We're going to start here first. We're going to push the bearings into the holder. We're going to orient the diff with the screws on the left. Now I'm going to set the bearing holder with the bearing into D6. And it should look like that. Then I'll stack the differential on top. Make sure it lines up and put on the other side. Alright, snap closed. This BA5 screw doesn't need to go through the outer plate, so let's put that on first. It should go into this hole right there. This will hold the gearbox together while we work on the other screws. Now we're going to line up the D5 outer plate with the holes in the gearbox here and here. Line it up like that. The longer BA1 screw goes into this hole on the left, and the shorter BA3 screw goes into the hole on the right. That feels pretty solid. And we're done with step 2. Step 3. Let's find all of these screws. I found 4 BA2 screws, and I finally found a BA3. Now let's find part D4. It's this one. We're also going to need D9, this one right here. D1, which is this. D11 and D12, which are these two right here. Let's prepare these 3 parts first. We'll start by putting D9 onto D4. Here is D4. And D9 is going to go on this way. We're going to put on a screw here and here. And we're going to use 2 of these BA2 screws. I'm not going to tighten the screws yet. Let's figure out D1 and D2 first. I forgot to cut out D2, and it's this one right here. Let's try to put D2 and D12 together and see how they fit. According to this diagram, these 2 pieces should have the same profile underneath. They're flush against each other, and there's this angle. Alright, let's work on D11 and D1. So D11 has this little tab here, I don't know if you can see that. And it's symmetrical. And there's a slot inside D1. So all we have to do is drop it in with the tab face down. I think D1 is a skid plate for the gearbox, so it would go underneath right here. Let's put a couple of screws in D4 first so I don't have to hold it. And let's work on D2. It should line up with this hole and that hole. And there's a collar that we need to get between the end plates. Let's grab these BA4 screws. Manual says to put a little bit of grease on the tip. I'm going to try without first. One on the other side. This D11 piece fell out. Let's put that back first. Same thing, one BA4 screw on each side. Now I'll tighten all 4 screws. Yeah, the manual suggestion was right. It would have been easier if you put a dab of grease on the tip of the screws. Now let's put the BA3 screw down here. Alright, I think we're done with step 3. I'm going to go back and put some grease on the differential gear before the next step. I'm just going to reach in here with the syringe. Alright, let me give the diff gear a little spin to spread out the grease. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Let's go to step 4. Let's find this counter gear, the spur gear, this long shaft, and short shaft. We're going to need 4 bearings. And if you're not using ball bearings, look for them in this bag. That's the little metal one. And that is the plastic one. And then the third one is the larger metal one right here. This big one. So let's start by putting the bigger metal bearing into the counter gear. I'm going to be using ball bearings. Then put one of the small metal bearings onto the other side. One small metal bearing for the spur gear as well. And lastly, the plastic bearing on the other side. We're ready for the shaft. I'm going to apply some grease and thread it through the gear. Make sure you don't displace the bearings. And do the same with the spur gear. I'm going to use the end of this cross wrench to push the bearing in. Just like that. Alright, now we're going to insert the counter and spur gear into here and here. Let's start with the counter gear first. Before I put it into the gearbox, we need to apply some grease. Now we're going to carefully drop this into the gearbox. Make sure the shaft and the bearings all stay in place. I'm going to press down and make sure it's all the way in. The shaft still turns. Looks like it's seated properly. Now let's work on the spur gear. This one goes on the outside of the case, so I think I can grease it after. Make sure it spins freely and it's secure. Good. Now I'll put on some grease. The cover is this right here, part D8. Something's not right. This is supposed to line up here. And this hole should attach here. Let me fix that first. Alright, that screw's in the right place now. The last 2 screws go here and here. Make sure this cover lines up with the shafts inside. Great, the cover is flush with the case. I think we're done. Alright, so we put together the differential. Then we put it into its housing. We added the side and the bottom piece of the gearbox. Then we finished it up by adding the counter gear and spur gear. And that's it for this video. If you got anything out of it, please drop a like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.